Over the last 10 days or so, Storm Kira and Storm Dennis have caused absolute carnage across the UK, flooding houses and businesses. As a result, football has obviously suffered. Not only have a lot of games been postponed, but a lot of games have really suffered in the conditions. One that have survived have had a lot of heavy wind, which makes football very difficult. And also, sadly, some grounds have been really adversely affected as well, with some serious flooding and wind damage to some stands as well. But this video we're going to look at the effect that wind has in non-league, because it is a bit different to grounds higher up in the pyramid that are more enclosed and a bit more sheltered, whereas in non-league generally grounds are a bit more open, and it has a bigger impact on games, and whether the wind really should be considered as a bigger factor in terms of postponing games, because waterlogged pitches and frozen pitches, often games are postponed due to these reasons, whereas wind pretty much doesn't happen. So we're going to look into whether it's something that could be considered, because it does really make games very difficult. We'll look into it in this video straight after this. So before we start, this video has been kindly sponsored by our channel sponsors, OneFootball. This app allows you to see the latest confirmed transfers, the latest transfer rumours, and all that transfer info can be tailored to what you want to see. If you like the sound of it and want to download it, then the link to download it will be in the top line of the description. There's been a number of clubs that have been affected by flooding, but the ones that are the worst, the likes of Tadcaster Albion, whose ground has flooded for the second time in just a few months, caused a lot of damage, and the club is really actually struggling to continue and survive. Wisbech Town, another one, who had a stand that was erected in 2010. This was blown over and completely ruined, but unfortunately, because it's classed as a temporary structure, they probably won't get any sort of payout from their insurers. On last Tuesday, the 11th of February, I was at Farsley Celtic versus Kidderminster Harriers in Farsley. I think it was the only game that was left on in the National League North, and the wind was, to be honest, a complete joke. It was crazy. It was so strong, and you physically could not play any football. You couldn't predict where on earth the ball was going to land. You could kick, it resorted to pretty much just kicking the ball and just running after it and just hoping for the best. Kidderminster won, thankfully, but as a game of football, it wasn't a great spectacle. Now, this sort of condition, compare that to a frozen pitch. If we got there that day and the pitch was frozen, that would have had a game postponed. Same goes for if the pitch was particularly waterlogged. Now, I know the reason is due to player safety. That's why they cancelled the game. The pitch is not playable. The players could have injuries potentially, but wind, does this have the same impact? Probably not in terms of player safety front, but in terms of actually making the game fair for the players themselves. This was a really crucial game, for example, and the wind was causing a horrendous problem that you physically couldn't play any real football. Then this does have a massive impact on the game. People complain at referees making bad decisions, or VAR having an impact at the higher levels. Wind doesn't really have an impact at higher levels because the grounds are quite enclosed. It creates almost a bit of a microclimate where it doesn't really matter about wind, whereas at lower levels, obviously, the ground's a lot more open and wind has a much bigger impact. In terms of VAR and referee decisions, these have a big impact on games, and wind has such a huge impact on games. They could argue that this is just going to be the same for each team. If the wind is blowing in a particular direction, then it's going to have the benefit to the one team in the first half and the other team in the second half. But regardless, it makes it very difficult. On Saturday the 15th of February, in the National League North, for example, 9 of the 11 scheduled matches were postponed. Only 2 survived. Games at Blythe and Gateshead. Gateshead versus Kidderminster, which is where I was, and Kidderminster got a 0-0 draw. But again, that ground at Gateshead is very open, and the wind had a big impact. One big gust of wind, for example, just took the ball literally coming back to where it came from. But interestingly, the National League actually caused a lot of the games to be postponed out of those 9 that were postponed due to travel concerns. So the National League were seen as being proactive on that front to make sure that the supporters and players and staff were all protected and they didn't have to make an unnecessary journey that would potentially be dangerous. But having said that, obviously Kidderminster went to Gateshead, which is a long trek, and it's a similar journey to what a lot of teams would have been making. For example, York had a game against Hereford postponed. That journey backwards is very similar to Kidderminster to Gateshead, at least for the majority of the journey it is. And actually coming back home from Gateshead, there were some really terrible conditions. Going there wasn't too bad, but coming home was really bad. The coach that we were on was swaying in between different lanes in the motorway because of the strength of the winds, and obviously being a coach, the winds being high and coaches being tall and thin, it had a massive impact. The strong winds doesn't have the same impact on the safety of players, it could be argued, but if you do ask a number of footballers what the worst condition for them to play in is, a lot of them will say wind, because of how unpredictable the ball landing and how difficult it can be to really judge what is actually going to happen when a player kicks a ball. Apparently, once winds do get 60 miles per hour as detected by the most local weather station, then the stadium has to be evacuated and obviously the game will be called off. But why is it that the wind has to be this high? And the reason then is because the stadium has to be evacuated for health and safety. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Do you think that the impact of wind on football matches should be looked at a bit more? Let me know your thoughts. And finally, I just hope that everyone who's been affected by Storm Ciara and Storm Dennis finds a solution and doesn't have any real horrible issues in terms of their house being permanently damaged and things like that. And I hope everyone is okay and manages to come through it, because it has caused some really bad flooding across the UK. But yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.